I've received a few requests recently to create a series on how to play bass guitar. Specifically, you've been asking, how can you apply what you've learned about lead and rhythm guitar to playing bass? For rhythm and lead guitarists, learning at least the rudiments of bass playing is an excellent idea. And I can promise you that time invested in this will pay off many times over. In addition to learning to play an extra instrument, you'll also gain a perspective on music that will further help you develop your lead and rhythm playing, as well as improve your overall musicianship. These days, a bass guitar can have almost any number of strings. But we're going to keep things simple and stick with 4-string bass. If you've never played bass before, then I strongly recommend starting with 4 strings, as it's relatively easy to carry forward what you learn onto instruments with more strings later. Whereas starting out with more strings is more likely to be confusing than it is helpful. Okay, let's start with picking hand technique. You can play bass with a plectrum, in which case most of what you've learnt from playing 6-string guitar will apply, with perhaps the obvious addition that you generally use a thicker, heavier plectrum to play the bass, as it's got thicker and heavier strings. But the vast majority of bass players these days use their fingers to pick the guitar. And to do this, we simply adopt roughly the same sort of posture as you should use for strumming guitar. So the first step is to hold your hand out straight, let go of all your muscles so that your hand drops like this, shake your wrist, shake your hand around so that the wrist becomes nice and relaxed, completely loose. And then transfer that across to the bass so that your first 2 fingers are just sitting on the top string like this. And use a sort of walking action like this, allowing the finger to pluck through the string and come to rest on the string below. For the time being, avoid using the very tip of the finger like this, but rather use the fleshy pad of the finger just below the tip. So that's the first exercise that I would recommend to you coming to the bass as a newbie. Simply play 8 notes on each string with a nice steady rhythm. And concentrate on getting a clean, consistent sound. Next, we want to get the other hand going. And just as we do on the 6-string guitar, I recommend this exercise to get all 4 fingers into action. And so on. Now, even if you're a relatively experienced guitarist, this is still an important step to get used to the relatively large distances, physical distances involved in playing the bass guitar. So those are the physical fundamentals that are best grooved in simply by using those 2 exercises as warm-ups each time you pick up the instrument. So now let's move on to talk about how the notes are laid out on the bass fretboard. And this is a nice simple subject if you already play guitar. And this is because we normally tune the bass to the notes E, A, D and G, exactly one octave below the bottom 4 strings of the 6-string guitar. So this of course means that you'll be exactly as good at naming all the notes up the fretboard on the bass as you are on the 6-string guitar. Now, when I teach lead guitar, the first scales that I generally get my students to learn are the blues scales or pentatonic scales. And this is simply because these scales provide them with the notes that they're most likely going to be using most of the time in the sort of solos that are found in blues, rock, country and pop music. On the bass, however, I strongly suggest the first scale pattern you should learn is this movable major scale pattern. And this pattern can be used on practically any note, starting either on the bottom E string or on the 3rd string, the A string. Here are the grid diagram and tab for this pattern, shown in the key of G, starting on the bottom string. So that's the end of the instant foundation course. But to bridge efficiently to the next lesson in this series, I'm going to make one more suggestion. As soon as you're happy that you can play this movable major scale pattern in any key, starting on either of the bottom 2 strings, then begin to drill yourself to learn the names of each note in the pattern, not by note name, not by A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, or B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, but rather by interval number, like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. To help you get going with this, here is a G major scale with numbers instead of note names. So a good way to drill this is to pick a key at random and simply have a go at randomly naming intervals. So here we have the 1st, the 3rd, the 8th, the 6th, the 7th, the 4th, the 8th, the 5th, the 1st, the 3rd, the 2nd, and so on, until you've established a pattern in your mind such that you know instantly the interval number of each of the notes in that pattern. 1, 8, 6, 7, 3, 5, 4, 8, 7, 1, 2, 6, and so on. This trick of learning to think in interval numbers instead of note names will enable you to learn your bass lines many times quicker, and also learn them in such a way as to make them instantly transposable to any key. An added bonus for you as a guitar player will be that it's going to help resolve many issues in your guitar playing as well, perhaps even some issues you don't even know you've got yet. In the next lesson in this mini-series, we'll start applying this trick to get you into a position where you can play a functional bass line along to any chord sequence, effectively turning you into an instant bass player.